In this weather topic video, we are going to be discussing the Dvorak technique. This is something that I have known about for a little while, but have never really dived into. So I decided to dive into it to learn about it myself and also make a video on it so that I can help others understand it as well. This technique was spawned from the satellite age, so starting back in the 60s and 70s, and has continued onwards today with relatively little change. The overall concept of the Dvorak remains the same. So we're going to first start, of course, with how it looks before I dive into dissecting this thing. First of all is that it is a number scale. This might sound weird for tropical systems. It goes from 1.0 all the way to 8.5, although I've seen also 8.0 being the maximum as well. It goes up and down by 0.5 measurements here, and it was, as it originally was, it connected cloud patterns with a development decay model of tropical systems, and was also entirely based on Westpac data, Westpac being the Western Pacific, so where tropical storms are called typhoons, or very intense cyclonic storms if you're in the Indian Ocean, or something to that matter, but Westpac would be typhoons in this case. This did lead to a bunch of errors when using it for the Atlantic Basin and also the the Eastern Pacific, because the Western Pacific tends to create much more intense storms. Now, why that is a very, very good question. So nowadays it has evolved to also use entirely cloud patterns, not ground. We're talking about clouds. Use cloud patterns as well as infrared and visible satellite imagery. Obviously, it was using visible imagery as well at its very beginning, but we also now have infrared imagery on satellites, which is super cool. This is going to be repeated pretty often. The Dvorak technique uses only satellite imagery, which is really cool. Usually you need a bunch of things to help predict the strength of something or really anything weather related. For example, tornadoes, you need a bunch of damage indicators, the Doppler radar detecting the hook echo that can show how strong the storm is, and all of these things go into trying to guesstimate tornado strength before any damage is surveyed. But that's also the only way that tornadoes can be properly assessed is with aftermath, unfortunately. But tornadoes are kind of a whole different breed of thing. Some limitations here on the Dvorak is that the 24-hour limit for going up or down is limited to 2.5 T numbers, which can be a problem. Usually it isn't. This is a fairly reasonable limit, but not has also not been followed as well before because some storms do increase in strength or decrease in strength very rapidly, sometimes well above 2.5 T numbers. Also, interestingly, the Dvorak technique does not apply to subtropical or extratropical storms. For those, you will need another technique, and you will need to convert if you are going from the Dvorak to this other technique. Say if you're looking at, let's say, a random storm that I recently covered, Hurricane Carol. If you're going to study it using the Dvorak technique, and then it goes to extratropical, you're going to need to convert everything from the Dvorak to this extratropical technique. So that's a little troublesome. Lastly, the eyewall replacement cycle, something that is relatively common inside strong storms, is not covered and is not part of the Dvorak technique as a whole. It is completely not considered in the slightest, which is, again, odd because most storms, most strong hurricanes undergo some sorts of eye wall replacement cycle at least once. So, what are the numbers and what are these cloud patterns that I'm talking about? Well, from T 1.0 to T 4.5, we have the curved band pattern. From T 1.5 to 3.5 is the shear. T 2.5 to 5.0 is the central dense overcast, or CDO. There's also a thing called the central cold cover that is a description rather than part of the T numbers. T 4.0 to 4.5 is the banding eye, and 4.5 to 8.0 is the eye pattern. This is seen here in this graph, and you'll be seeing this chart for every single slide here on out. We also see here we have our T numbers down here this is taken from Wikipedia, very thankfully they have this. And 1 minute wind speeds down here, the categories right in the middle, and then the pressures. And notice that the Atlantic and the Pacific, specifically Northwest Pacific, are different. This is because, again, the Westpac produces stronger storms, again, for reasons that we don't quite know yet. It may just be because that the Pacific is simply larger. So what the heck is curved band? T 1.0 to T 4.5? Well, first of all, curved band uses both visible and infrared satellite imagery. It is going to be having curved band, of thunderstorms that are spiraling around the center. This is going to be around the very beginning of a tropical depression or tropical storm actually looking relatively cohesive, but it is still going to have that pretty ragged, pretty loose look. The intensity with a curved band pattern is given by the spiral distance of the band surrounding the center. So we will take this middle image here in T3. So again, this is the one that I'm going to use demonstration. It's circled in red. The way that the intensity would be given is splitting this up into 8 sections like a pie or a pizza, depending on your preference. I prefer pizza. And counting how many of the slices the band goes across. There would then be some further calculations, and the intensity would be given. Granted, this is not an exact intensity, this is all approximate, but it has been found that Dvorak is pretty consistent in being pretty damn close to the actual intensity. Now T 1.5 to 3.5 is shear. This one also uses visible and infrared imagery. What we are seeing with a shear cloud pattern is that the thunderstorms are pretty off-center and pretty lopsided. So it would be something like T 1.5 right here. It could also be something like this T3, maybe even the T4 right here. And the thunderstorms are off-center and lopsided because the system is encountering some jet stream and high winds aloft. And by aloft, I mean up in the air, and I don't just mean like a few hundred feet. I mean thousands upon thousands of feet up, where thunderstorms are forming their towers, and the jet stream can be just straight up shearing those away. So the winds might be so high that it is straight up just not allowing towers to form. And the jet stream can also be a big part in that as well. The intensity with a shear cloud pattern is given by determining the distance of the center from the edge of the cumulonimbus. That would be the thunderstorms that we're talking about, also called CB for short, and the center definition. So the center and center definition are kind of the same thing, and it would just be determining how far away those two are. A little weird, but you know, I'm not the one who invented it. T 2.5 to 5.0 is the central dense overcast. I'm also going to throw in the central cold cover just to talk about that here, along with the CDO. The CDO cloud pattern will use either visible or infrared. It does not use both at the same time. It's not required, I should say. It will be using infrared if the center is really embedded inside of that CDO. Note that CDO starts at 2.5. 2.5 is around minimal tropical storm strength, so that'll be 38 to 39 miles per hour. And with specifically the eye pattern, the size of the CDO will be considered. It kind of is with banded eye, although kind of not really as well. A little confusing, I know. Now, the intensity is given by either the size of the CDO itself, as well as banding, or by surrounding temperatures, if it is using specifically infrared for the surrounding temperatures. What it's going to try and find with infrared and surrounding temps is the temperature of the cloud tops and then the surrounding ocean to try and get a sense of what the eye temperature is going to be like, which is what the eye pattern does, uses eye temperature difference with the cumulonimbus tops. That's a spoiler there. And generally, the trend for CDO is that the more the center is tucked into this central dust overcast, the stronger it is usually deemed. So if that center of the storm is right smack dab in the middle of the CDO, it would be a pretty intense tropical storm, possibly nearing a hurricane, if not already a hurricane. Now, the central cold cover, I said I would cover it here. This cloud pattern is indicating that there is surprisingly little development despite how healthy the storm may look, despite how the storm, again being healthy, may look like that it'll develop very rapidly, may not develop at all within 12, 24, 36, 48 hours. And that's just because, again, a central cold you do not want. A storm does not want to be cold, storm wants to be warm. And that's about it. T4.0 to T4.5, the shortest number difference, is the banding eye cloud pattern. Banding eye utilizes specifically visible imagery. Storms are going to be around Category 1 strength at around T4 to T4.5. And because they're going to be around Cat 1 strength, these should be definitely much more well defined and much more banded. Simply, the intensity is given by the distance of the eye from the CDO edge as well as banding. Obviously, with all of these, I'm not going to go into specific calculations on how this is all done. Simply just a overview for everyone, including myself, to help us understand it. Our last cloud pattern here, ranging from T4.5 to T8.0 or T8.5, is the eye pattern. Infrared imagery is used for the eye pattern, and when your hurricane has an eye, it should be well defined, strong, and overall very healthy looking. That would be from T6 all the way to T8 as we see here on this graph. So definitely your hurricane look, so to say. There's the classic hurricane look in a way. Oops. The intensity for the eye pattern is given via the difference of the cloud tops and the inside eye temperature. Inside eye temperatures usually range from, I'd say around mid 70s maybe, all the way to 90s in Fahrenheit. And your cloud tops are going to be well into the negatives. And from that difference, you're going to do some calculations. Those calculations are then going to give you the relative intensity, or at least a pretty accurate guess at the intensity of the storm. last thing here is the trends and finally the summary. It's the last slide here, I promise. I recommend that you check out this PDF on the Dvorak Technique, which helped me greatly in understanding everything here. There's also a PDF explaining the Dvorak Technique, again, that is different from this one that I have linked here. Again, that PDF, super helpful with this, and I really could not have done it without that. But again, trends in summary is that the higher the T number, the stronger the storm should be. You should not have a T8 tropical storm. If you have a T8 tropical storm, something is seriously wrong. The stronger the storm is, the more banded it should be, and the CDO should be either larger or rounder. It can also be both as well. But for the most part, what this is saying is that the stronger the storm should be, the healthier it should be, the healthier it should look too. The center should also be much more distinct, the higher the T number is as well, which is why the eye pattern only comes in after T4, so only starts after T4.5. That is when, because not even Cat 1s may have an eye, you know? Sometimes not even Cat 2s may have one, but your Cat 2s should have an eye, of course, Category 2 storms. Specifically, talking the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale, which uses category. Those should have eyes. Cat 5s should absolutely have an eye. If it doesn't, then there's something wrong with your calculation. Or the storm, or just your intensity is wrong. I'm just gonna say that. Or you're just not seeing the storm right. Or maybe the storm is just being weird. The eye is so small that you can't see it, of course. Wilma. Sorry, all jokes aside, this Dvorak technique is used by both the NHC and the JTWC, the JTWC being the Japanese version of the National Hurricane Center. It is also used by a few others as well. The National Hurricane Center, in issuing alerts for or updates on tropical storms, will often quote its Dvorak numbers, saying that the storm is like, say, T5, let's say, with whatever else with whatever else the update says. Again, please note the Dvorak technique is indeed not a direct measurement, and like I said at the very beginning, does not include the process of the eye wall replacement cycle, which usually ends up weakening a storm, or it does not include subtropical, extratropical storms, and there's also that T2.5 per day increase or decrease limits, which can be a problem if the eye wall replacement cycle is particularly brutal on a storm. But with that all being said, that is all that I have for the Dvorak technique. I absolutely learned something while creating this video, creating these slides, I should say. And I hope that you all have learned something through this video. I hope to see you all in the next video, of course. So I will see you then. Until next time.